All right, well, today we're going to look at the percent proportion. This is chapter 6.3. So we've been dealing with fractions, percents, and decimals. And last chapter we were introduced to solving proportions, and today we kind of blend them together. So I'm going to discuss two different types of proportions that you can use. One is the one that you're going to see over here that the book uses, where we use A over W equals P over 100. And you want to understand that A would represent part, and W equals whole, and P equals percent, and then the 100 always stays as 100. That way when we write a number over 100, it's that number per cent, per 100. Okay, so it's A over P equals W over 100. I'm sorry, it's A over W equals P over 100. And again, that is right over here. That is our percent proportion. Now, the other percent proportion that I use, what I grew up using, is, well, is over of equals percent over 100. I think that both of these have their place where it's easier to use one of the proportions in some parts, and in other problems it's easier to use the other proportion. So it's really up to you which one you want to use, and just kind of fool around with it, see what you like. Again, so we're not confused here, we have is over of equals percent over 100. The other one we have is A over W equals P over 100. So part over whole equals percent over 100. It's really the same thing, just we're using different words to kind of help us solve these problems. So when you see this problem here, 3 out of 4 is 75. Well, I can think of it this way. If I'm looking at using the A over P, I'm sorry, A over W equals P over 100, I know that the part, 3 out of 4, that tells me it's going to be 3 out of 4. The 100 remains constant. Therefore, we don't know what the percent is. Well, actually, they give it to us. It's on this. The percent is 75. That's where we put it here, if that makes sense. And then on this proportion, again, 3 out of 4 is 75%. It's out of 4, so the 4 is down here. It's 75%, so the 75 goes where the percent sign is. And then the last part is 3. So let's go ahead and try some problems. Example 1. What percent of 15 is 12? Okay. For me, when I see of and is like this, I prefer my method. I like doing the is over of equals percent over 100. Let me show you why. I know that we're looking at of 15. So where you see of on the bottom, I put the 15. Also, the 100 is always 100. Then I see is 12. So where I see is on the top left, I put my 12. And so the only thing I don't know is the percent. And so for the percent, I'm going to put an X or an N or whatever letter you want to use. So I don't know what the percent is. And that's why I'm solving. It says, what percent? That's what I'm trying to find out. So then I just have to cross multiply. And I do 12 times 100 is 1200 equals 15x. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 15. and 15s cancel out, and I get x equals 80. And it's 80%, so I'm going to put the percent sign here. You can see the other method over here. Again, I way prefer my method over here, using the is over of proportion as opposed to the A over W proportion, just because it works really nicely with it. But you can use either method. I just think mine makes more sense for this particular problem. There will be problems up ahead that the other proportion works more easily, and you'll see it when we get there. Okay? Let's go ahead and look at our next problem. Again, I see what number is 36% of 50. This just tells me I want to definitely use my is over of equals percent over 100. I think it works much better on this. Let me show you why. I know that there's 36%, so the 36 goes where the percent sign is. Again, the 100 stays where the 100 is. And then I know of 50, so I see the of in the bottom left, I put my 50. The only thing I don't know is the what number is. And so that's going to go right here, the is. I just cross multiply them. 100 times x is 100x. 50 times 36 is, and you're allowed to use your calculator for this, the basic stuff. It's going to get you 1,800. And then I can go ahead and divide both sides by 100. They cancel out, and I get x equals 18. So x, the number, would be 18. Hopefully this makes sense to you. And we have one more example to try together. In this example, we have 150% of what number is 24. Again, it is begging me to use the is over of equals percent over 100. For all three of these, I think this proportion is much easier to use, because now, look, I'm going to have then I have 150 times x, which is 150x. I can divide both sides by 150, get that x by itself. These cancel out. And I get x equals 16. So 150% of what number is 24? Well, 115% of 16 is 24. So that's all I have to do here. So hopefully these three examples make sense to you. I want you to go ahead and try number 1 and 2, 3, and 4. So why don't you go ahead and give those a try, or if you just want to try the first two and then check out my solution for the first two and then go on to 3 and 4, that's fine. So take a moment, give it a try. Okay, let's see how you did on these problems. Again, I'm going to start off with my proportion, which is over of equals percent over 100. And I know that my 100 stays 100, and then I'm given is 3, so with the is I put a 3. I know it says what percent, so my percent is the unknown, and then I have of 5. So my of 5, the of is 5. Just that easy. Go ahead and cross multiply. I have 5 times x equals 5x. I have 100 times 3 is 300. Can divide them both by 5. And I get x equals 60. And it does say what percent, so it's 60%. That's all we do for number 1. Let's try number 2 now. Again, I'm going to use the same proportion. is over of equals percent over 100. And yes, I do recommend that you put down the actual percent proportion every single time so you have something to follow. It makes it much easier. Just get yourself in the habit. When you have a formula, put it down, use it. It takes an extra 10 seconds to write, but it will help you get this right every time. So I'm going to go ahead and start plugging in what information I know. I know already that the 100 is 100. Then I see 25 is. So again, for the 25 is, I'm going to put 25 in the is part, so top left. And then I have of 20, so that goes on the bottom. And the unknown is the percent. What percent? So that goes X for the percent. I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply. 100 times 25 is 2,500. 20 times X is 20X. Now I'm just going to go ahead and isolate that variable by dividing 20 from both sides. They cancel out. And I get X equals 125. Again, feel free to use your calculator here. And it's asking about what percent, so it's 125%. So again, if you think of it in the terms of part and whole, our part is 25, our whole is 20, and so our part is greater than the whole, therefore it's greater than 100%. That's why it went over 100%. In the first problem, our part is 3, our whole is 5, and the part is smaller than the whole, therefore it's less than 100%, it was 60%. Just something to think about. Okay, if you've not had a chance to try these out, take a moment right now and give these a whirl. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look, see how you did. Again, I'm going to use is over of equals percent over 100. I'm going to put in the information that I know. I know that there's 100 on the bottom. There always is 100 on the bottom. And then I know I have of 60. So I'm going to put a 60 where the of is. Then I have is 80%. So the percent is 80. And so the last part is what number is. I don't know what number is. So I'm going to put an X for the is. So 100 times X is 100X. 60 times 80 is 4,800. I can divide both sides by the 100 to get that X by itself. We're going to isolate that X. Again, feel free to use your calculator. 4,800 divided by 100 is just 48. It's not a percent, it's a number, and we were finding out the part. So we know that the whole is 60, therefore the part is 48. The part is less than the whole, and that's why it's 80%. Okay, let's try our last one over here, number 4. Again, I'm going to use is over of equals percent over 100. And so I have X, well, let's just do this, 10%. I'm sorry. Let me fill in what I know. Get ahead of myself. I know that the 100 is 100, right? And then I know I'm of 40.5, so the of is 40.5. And then the is what number? I don't know. So that's my X. And then the percent is 10%. So put a 10 over in the percent sign. I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply. 100 times X is 100X. 40.5 times 10 is 405. And, like usual, I can use my calculator to divide both sides by 100. Some of you may not even need a calculator for this part. I'm going to put X here. And 405, well, 400 divided by 4 is 4. 400 divided by 100 is 4. So 405 divided by 100 is 4.05. And so 4.05 is 10% of 40.5. That's the part of the whole, and that's 10% of it. Hopefully these examples made some sense. We're going to move on to our next example. Funny thing happened. I finished off the video and realized I never hit on pause. Therefore, I'm going to be doing this again. That's my bad. So let's go ahead and see where we're at. So on to example number 4. This is one of those examples where I think it's going to be much easier to use the part over whole equals percent over 100 formula. I think this is a much easier formula to use. Let's go ahead and try this one out. So let's take a look at the problem. It says the bar graph shows the strengths of tornadoes that occurred in Alabama in 2011. What percent of the tornadoes were EF1s? So again, we're going to use the the part over whole equals percent over 100. We're going to use this as our proportion and follow it. I think it works much easier. You don't see the very clear is and the very clear of and very clear percent, all three of these parts, to use my formula. So this makes the all or part over whole equals percent over 100 formula much easier to use. So let's go ahead and take this step by step. What do we know? Well, let's go ahead and begin with, we know that 100 is our constant. It's always over 100. And we know it says what percent of the tornadoes were EF1s. Our unknown is the percent. We're trying to figure out what the percent is. So for percent, we're going to head and put our P in. Now, we're left with the part, which is A, and the whole, which is W. What is the part? What is the whole? Well, it's asking us to look at what percent of all the tornadoes were EF1s. So the EF1s is just one part of it. Okay? So the EF1s is just part of it. And the EF1s represent 58. So the part is 58. Well, the EF1s being a specific type of tornado, being the part, which would tell us then the whole would be all of the tornadoes. So you'd want to add up the 36, the 58, the 29, the 13, the 7, and the 2. You're going to add up all the different EF type of tornadoes. And when we add those all up, we're going to get 145. So the whole is 145. So 58 out of 145 equals this percent over 100, right? So let's go ahead and solve our proportion. We're going to do 100 times 58 is 5,800. We do 145 times P is 145P. And we can divide both sides by 145. And we find out that P equals 40. And that would be 40%. So, in conclusion, 40% of tornadoes were EF1s. That's how you'd want to write this in a complete sentence, since this is a word problem. All right, so for number 7 here, I'd like you to refer back to your chart. It says 20% of the tornadoes in central Alabama were on April 27th. How many tornadoes does this represent? I would use the formula A over W equals P over 100. And go ahead and solve this one, see how you guys do. And then once you're done with this, we'll go over it, and then we'll try 5 and 6 next, okay? All right, if you refer back to the information we had from example 4, this is what we know. We know that 100 is on the bottom because 100 is always on the bottom. And then we know it says 20% of the tornadoes occurred in central Alabama. So we know the percent is 20. And it asked, what percent of tornadoes, again, 20% of the tornadoes occurred in central Alabama, right? Now, we don't know how many tornadoes that represents, as it's asking right over here. So that is going to be our unknown. So we'll just leave that as A. But what we do know is that there are 145 tornadoes that were in Alabama in that year. So we'll continue using the 145 from the problem. Now, if this is the part where you're like, oh, you know what, I now understand what I did wrong, take a moment, solve the rest of this proportion, and then check in with me. If you got this as your proportion, you can go through and watch to see, make sure you did the work correctly. So we have 100 times A is 100A. Equals 20 times 145, which would get us 2,900. Can then divide both sides by 100. And we find out that these cancel out, and we have A equals 29. So, 29 tornadoes represent 20% of the total tornadoes. All right, that was the tough one. Let's go ahead and look at the last two problems. It's basically the same thing you learned in the beginning of this section, except for now we're dealing with a decimal of a percent, or there's a fraction involved. So I want you guys to give these two problems a try and see how you do. Okay, let's go ahead and see how you guys did on this. So for both of these, I'm going to go ahead and use the is over of equals percent over 100. So for our first one, it says 0.1%. So that's going to be at the very, well, here, I'll do this. We know for sure that we have 100 on the bottom. And we have 0.1%, so that goes on top. And then is 4, so the is a 4 over here. And the of what number is your x. So we plug this in and we get 400 equals 0.1x. And we're going to divide both sides by 0.1. These cancel out. And I get 4,000 equals x. That's all there is to number 5. And then for our next problem, again I'm going to use is over of equals percent over 100. I know for sure that my 100 is on the bottom. Now I need to figure out the rest. So I see 25%. So I'm going to put 25 in the percent part. I also see 1/2 is. So 1/2 can be also written as 0.5. So I'm going to put the decimal 0.5 Although I guess I could have put a fraction. I just prefer the decimal in this. And then my unknown, of course, will be of what number? So that's going to be an x. So I get 0.5 times 100, which is 50, equals 25 times x, which is 25x. I'll divide both sides by 25 to get the x isolated. And I end up getting 2 equals x. And there you have it. That is the end of the percent proportion. You now are filled with so much knowledge that you can conquer all of the proportion problems that will be coming your way. So best of luck. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.